Unlock your healing, the mechanics of befriending your parts. Heal your trauma through the step-by-step process of establishing a relationship with your inner parts. I once had a client who was desperately wanting to get the help that she needed to release her trauma, but she had a part of her that kept saying it was a waste of time and nothing would ever change. When she actually got to know that part, aka she befriended it, she came to understand that this part was working hard to keep her from extreme feelings of disappointment. She had later disclosed that the feeling of being a disappointment was one of the worst feelings that permeated her entire upbringing. So this critical part of her thought that it could talk her down enough, she wouldn't change anything, and then she would never be disappointed. And once she understood this part's true intentions and validated these intentions, which is different than validating behavior, this part actually started to cry with relief, and it was overwhelmed with good feelings that it was finally understood. And for the first time, this part felt hope that things could be different. Even though it was still unsure of what this whole healing thing was going to be about, it was willing to take a leap of faith on her because she showed it that she cared about it, that it wasn't a disappointment, and that no matter what happens, they will be in this together. This is the power of befriending your parts. It moves mountains, it melts obstacles. It is an extremely important life skill. And this video is going to walk you through it step by step. I also created a free Meet a Part of You worksheet that walks you through this process step by step as well. You can download it for free using the link in the description. If you've heard about parts work and you are ready to dive in with both feet to start your own parts work practice, make sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel because ain't nobody talking about parts work the way that I'm talking about parts work. Wait, parts? If you've never heard of parts or parts work before, I invite you to check out this video before continuing because you are going to enjoy this one way more with a basic understanding of parts work. I invite you to practice befriending a part in real time as you watch this video. You can absolutely watch through this video and have a fascinating intellectual experience, or you can have a transformational experience and try out each step with your own part as you go. Up to you. Step 1, identify a part of you. There are 3 trailheads that will lead you to a part: a thought, emotion, body sensation. I also recorded an entire video about the process of identifying a part of you, so you can watch it right here. What I want you to do is take a moment to tune in to what it's like in your inner world right now. Notice the thoughts that you're having, notice any emotions you might be feeling, any body sensations, and then pick one to hone in on. One total, not one of each. And once you have it, move on to the next step. Step 2, anchor it into a body sensation. Instead of jumping right into trying to talk with this part, as many of our manager parts like to do, I invite you to spend a second getting more focused on the part by anchoring it into a body sensation. So locating a part in or around your body is important because your inner world can sometimes get fluid and murky, but when a part is anchored into a body sensation, it makes a huge difference in your ability to stay present with it. So ask yourself the question, how does this thought or emotion or body sensation show up in or around my body? Just take a second and see. I get that this might be a hard question at first because in normal day-to-day life, you're probably not prompted to think about how you are feeling inside your body, but just take a second and try to identify where this part of you shows up around your body or in your body. Is it a tightness in the chest, a sinking feeling in your stomach? Is it floating somewhere outside your body? Because yep, your parts can exist outside of your body too. If this is the case, I invite you to just intuitively point to where it is, like to the left, behind you, over your shoulder. Sometimes it can feel like you're making something up, but you're actually not. You can really trust the first thing that comes to you. Once you've honed in on where this part shows up in your body, move on to the next step. Step 3, flush out the body sensation. Now, I'd like you to ask yourself the following questions. What does this sensation feel like? It might be tight or empty or throbbing, jittery. Is there any motion to it? Is it shrinking or expanding or pulsing or spinning, or is it static? Is there any color associated with it? Blue, black, red, or changing colors? Is there any texture associated with it? Sometimes you might be able to sense it as rough or smooth or watery or hard. Do any images or visuals come to mind? Not everyone gets visuals with their parts, and it's perfectly fine if you don't. Just check and see. Once you have given each of these questions some time, move on to the next step. Step 4, ask the magic question. how am I feeling toward this part? This is the most important question in all of parts work, because this is the question that begins to establish a relationship between you and this part, which is incredibly important because what gets traumatized in relationship gets healed in relationship. Notice that this question isn't how is the part feeling? The question is how am I feeling toward this part? The goal of this question is to get you and the part in there together. If you are in there observing the part, how are you feeling toward it? Sometimes I'll hear people say, I'm feeling curious. I want to get to know it more. Or sometimes people say, I'm feeling sad toward it. I can see it's hurting. Or I'm feeling a lot of compassion toward it. It's also super common to hear things like, I'm annoyed at it. I don't want it to be here. Or I'm scared of it. Here's the thing. If you're not feeling at least some genuine curiosity or compassion toward this part, or a sense of openness, that's a sign you're actually seeing through the eyes of another part of you. Because if you are seeing through the eyes of your essence, of the love inside of you, you'd be feeling more along the lines of compassionate, curious, open, without an agenda. This is important because healing happens when our essence meets our parts, not when our parts are fighting with one another. You can learn more about your essence in this video. So ask yourself how you're feeling toward this part and see if you can get yourself to a place where you're feeling a sense of genuine curiosity to get to know it more. Step 5, establish a relationship with this part. Once you are coming from a place of genuine curiosity and maybe even compassion, you can start establishing a relational connection with this part of you in your inner world. It's exciting stuff. So ask yourself, can this part sense my presence in here with it? Sometimes parts are so focused on their role that they don't even notice you are there in there with them. So see if you can gently make your presence known to this part. Once the part can sense you in there with it, now ask, what's it like for this part to have me in here with it? Does it like having company? Is it skeptical of you? What's it like for this part to not be alone? Whatever the answer, let it be okay. You might have to reassure this part that you just want to get to know it more. This part might be so used to only having a conversation with the other parts of you that are annoyed or ashamed of it that it doesn't realize that this is a different kind of conversation. There's no fixing or trying to make it be different. You just genuinely want to connect with it more. Then see if they are willing to have a conversation with you where you can learn more about them. If this part is interested in that, move on to the next step. Step 6, ask questions about their role and listen. Here are some of the best questions to ask to really understand this part and also to help this part feel like you actually understand them. You might want to grab a pen and paper or download the Meet a Part of You worksheet using the link in the description to jot down their answers. And as with all of these questions, don't try to think of an answer, just wait to see what answer comes forward. This is a skill that might take a little getting used to, and it might feel like you're making it up at first. Like, that's okay. Just go with it and trust the process. What role do you play for me? What's their job? How do they protect you? How long have you been playing this role? Sometimes they'll flash a memory of when they first took on this role. Sometimes they'll just say, as long as I can remember. Do you like playing this role? Some parts will admit that they don't even like playing the role that they play. They are just afraid of what would happen if they stopped. Which brings us to the next question. What are you afraid would happen if you stopped doing your job? Some parts say they're afraid you'll get overwhelmed by emotions, or they're afraid that another part will take over, or that if they don't do this job, you won't go to the gym as often, and then ultimately you'll be abandoned by your partner and be alone forever. It can get real dire real quick. This question is really important when it comes to understanding the gravity of the situation for this part. For instance, if this part believes you will be abandoned and alone forever, then it makes so much sense why it is so diligently doing its job, even though it doesn't even like it. So what is this part of you afraid would happen if it stopped doing its job? Now let's pause here. Can you see that in its own way, this part's intention is to try to protect you from something bad happening? If so, move on to step 7. Step 7 is validating your part's intentions. Hopefully, by this point, it is clear that the intention of this part of you is to protect you from something bad happening. This doesn't mean that you have to agree or condone the part's behavior or outcomes. This is just about validating this part's intentions to protect you and how hard that they have been working all of this time to try to protect you. I heard Dr. Becky Kennedy's advice to tell your parts, thank you for your years of service, because that's really what it's like for our parts. In their mind, they have been dutifully serving you all of this time. If it feels right, thank this part for working so hard to try to protect you. Go ahead, I will wait. A little validation goes a long way for our parts. Now, check in with this part by asking, how do you feel after hearing that? What's it like for you to have your positive intention finally understood by me? This can be a very tender moment between you. Let it be. Then, when you're ready, move on to the next step. Step 8 is close the conversation consciously. When you're ready to wrap up the conversation, you can ask, is there anything else you'd like me to know? Sometimes there is more. So keep listening if they need you to understand something else about them. When the conversation feels complete for both of you, you can ask, is there a name you would like to be called? It's always a good idea to have our parts name themselves instead of us giving them names. So what would this part like to be called? And finally, ask this part, would you like me to check in with you more? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Just check and see. If they do, make sure to establish a frequency of connection that you can actually stick to. Like, be honest and don't make promises you can't keep. This will ensure you build trust with this part by actually following up instead of this part feeling like you've abandoned it again. If you haven't already, download the worksheet that walks you through this whole process step by step. It's called the Meet a Part of You worksheet because it will streamline this process for you to do with as many parts of you as you want. Get ready for crazy new levels of inner clarity.